bug season. Heck, who am I kidding? It's always bug season in Texas. And that's why you need Grandeur Pest Solutions in your corner. They're locally owned and operated. They're trained, they're trustworthy, and they have a proven record as they have been in business for almost 10 years. They provide pest control against ants, bed bugs, bees, roaches, fleas, wasps, mosquitoes, rodents, spiders. If it crawls and you don't like it, they're probably going to take care of it for you. Now, they serve all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're locally owned. These two guys have been running this business since 2013, and every year they get bigger and bigger. But you know what they still do? They still have great customer service. In fact, if you get a hold of them, they're usually going to have your quote and your job ready to go within 48 hours. That's pretty good. Now, you can call them for a free estimate at 469-809-1769. You can find them online at Grandeur 4, that's the number 4, shore.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Just type in Grandeur Pet Solutions, and we are so happy that they're title sponsor for OutDrank The Coverage in 2023. The regular season is over. It's time to talk scenarios. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett. Intern Noe, OutDrank The Coverage. It's the NFL or the college football season ender as far as the regular season. This weekend was a weekend of so close games. We'll, of course, talk about that. We'll talk about the conference championship games, and we will talk about where we think the playoffs, what 4 teams are headed there. But first, Intern Noe, how are you doing? What are you drinking?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great.
Today I'm drinking Blanton's Single Barrel. It's one of their classics. Vanilla, a little bit of cinnamon, perfect bourbon. How about you, buddy? What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Gallant vodka and Gatorade and what we have termed from a camping trip about 13 years ago together, Gator Tail. But so you had said earlier in the other show, by the way, if you don't realize we're splitting shows, so if you hit this one thinking the NFL show will be part of it, look up or down on the playlist, and that's where that one is. You had said earlier in that last show, the NFL show, that it was typical bourbon vanilla. Is vanilla a typical ingredient in bourbon?
From what I've had, yeah.
Okay.
Vanilla, brown sugar,
Ooh, the brown
caramel.
sugar. My Essence Atkinson, that's my brown sugar.
Yeah, so it just depending on the alcohol content, you'll get those notes more. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to taste bourbon for the first time. I could go through all that, but it would take a while.
We might do some of that in the off season. Actually, got an email somebody asking, talk about you specifically. You always have different drinks, and so they were interested if maybe we did like a flight of bourbons or something like that on a show, and I think that would be a good idea. And I think it'd be fun to get Grant from our high school stuff in on all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so that's what we're drinking. And here's what we're thinking. Hey, look at that. I got a new tagline. I'm so smart. This Gator Tail might be working a little bit. We've been doing this show. This is our second show. We recorded an hour. And if you don't know, we record these on Monday late mornings. And I don't know about you, but the alcohol always kicks different at 11 a.m. than, say, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Just saying.
Yeah, 100% agree there.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what the week that was in college football, because it was a crazy week. Nothing changed outside of Michigan, Ohio State, but you knew one of those was going to happen anyway. But we had so many so close moments. So to frame this, Grant and I were in the third. If you're not from Texas or if you don't follow Texas high school football, we're in the third week of high school playoffs, or we were last week. There's 6 weeks, and Thanksgiving is usually that's one of the goals that coaches have. Make it to Thanksgiving. That's a good season. And we love it because with Friday being an off day, you get football all Friday, all Saturday, high school wise. And that's one of our big trips. And so this year we were down in Houston. We saw a doubleheader on Saturday or Friday. And on Saturday we woke up and we weren't really feeling high school. So we decided to go to a sports bar and watch the Michigan Ohio State game. And then we watched Louisville and Kentucky, A&M, LSU. All of them were on the screens that we could see. And then we went back to the hotel room to catch all the afternoon and night games. So I saw basically all the big games. And this was one of the craziest weeks for nothing big to happen that wasn't expected.
Yeah, I mean, if it played out the way we thought it was going to play out, there was going to be upset city, and Texas and Alabama, or Texas would have had a case to be in the top four as of today. Uh, but yeah, it just didn't have. Washington had a big scare. Alabama had a huge scare. That's going to go down in another Iron Bowl classic moment.
Yeah, it's the revenge.
We'll talk about the 4th and 31 later, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's revenge for the kick six, basically.
Michigan, Ohio State was closer than it was last year, but for a third year in a row, Michigan prevails. Florida State, I thought they were going to lose to Florida. You know, they're using their backup quarterback in this game. They were trailing going into the second half, but they rode their defense.
People forget, though, and I know he's played more games, but Florida's on their backup quarterback as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I mean, they haven't had the best of seasons. You heard about Florida early in the season, but you haven't really heard much of them the last few weeks, and that's for a good reason.
And all that kind of took a back seat to A&M doing A&M things, and I don't know how close Mark Stoops was. I know I went to bed on Saturday night. It was breaking that Mark Stoops was the next head coach of A&M, and I think that'd have been a perfectly fine hire. Woke up about 5 a.m. to Mark Stoops going on Twitter saying, yeah, they contacted me, but no, I'm not leaving. I don't know how far along that really was. Did he really say yes? And then you float that balloon out and people hate it and you say no, kind of like Tennessee did a few years ago with what's his name from Rutgers. Or if Mark Stoops really never was truly that far along in the process, and maybe an Aggie person didn't like it and they floated. Either way, turned out he wasn't, but they did make a hire, taking Duke's head coach Mark Elko, who was also the defensive coordinator for A&M for 4 years. Again, just like the Mark Stoops, I think this is a perfectly fine hire. I think it's a good hire in that there is no splash, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think A&M needs a grinder coach right now, and I think this guy can do it.
Yeah, former defensive coordinator, 2020. You know, for as much as you want to throw out that season, it still happened. And A&M was 9-1 that season. They had I know they lost, I think 24-7 Alabama. That was their only loss, but they had an Orange Bowl win, and it was a great season for A&M. And he was the defensive coordinator there. He left after the next season, and they haven't been as good since. So, I mean, this is kind of a good hire. And he did well at Duke last season. And this season, he had a great start, but then Riley Leonard got hurt, and he kind of dropped them to 7-5. But
you know the crazy thing about A&M, and I had noticed this again, 3 vodkas in. By the way, Bombshells. I'm not a big restaurant fan because breasts are great, but I'm at that age now where hey, I can go online and find them in 5 minutes. Usually, me and you are sending each other titty shots. I mean, of ourselves. But that's not the point. But Bombshells. At least this one's really good. They had these wings. You could get up to 3 different flavors if you got a lot, and we got a lot. We basically ordered like 45 wings on the day. Sorry, Brett. But the thing I noticed watching that LSU A&M game was that if A&M would have won that, them and LSU would have had the exact same record. How crazy that narrative has been about A&M, and like LSU's like, oh man, LSU's almost there. Look at their offense. They're next year, dude. Watch out for them. And I think those are all valid. But then A&M, if they could have beat LSU, they both would have been at like 8-4. And it's funny how we look at the A&M season as so terrible, and in ways it was, but it wasn't. I don't think it's as bad as people have made it out to be.
I mean, 7-5 is not bad, but there's high expectations when you lost your quarterback. Yeah. When you have a high-profile coach that's won a national championship, you have higher expectations than 7-5.
You're right. No, and all that's valid. I'm just saying it's funny how LSU kind of everybody's. I'm looking at this as like, are you going to look back in 2 years and this was actually a missed season for LSU? Because you and I were talking before we started. Jaden Daniels, I think, is a favorite for the Heisman. And if you look at his stats, he's basically done what Joe Burrows did at LSU with less talent. I mean, they're real talented. Again, less talent compared to when you look at the wide receivers that are in the NFL from that Joe Burrows team and the offensive line and even some of the defense. I mean, this LSU team, I kind of think maybe underperformed at the end of the day.
Yeah, man, looking at his stats, man, he has 3,800 yards, 40 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions.
That's crazy.
He's our leading rusher. He has 1,100 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. So 50 combined touchdowns.
And that's 4 interceptions in an offense that they throw the ball down the field.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in a conference that I know is not where they were 10 years ago defensively, but you're doing that against a lot of NFL talent. And I mean, again, are we going to now start saying he's going to revolutionize the game? Because that's what we do now. If a quarterback has a good season like Caleb Williams, they're the next guy's going to revolutionize football. No, I don't think it's. I think just the quarterback position in itself has finally been revolutionized. But all right. The other big one, Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State. He was the Oklahoma offensive coordinator. His dad was a head coach in all over Texas high school football, well known as being the Andrews Mustang head coach. In fact, Jeff played there. I know Jeff probably wouldn't recognize me, but if I said, "Hey, I remember I used to talk to him," but he's, I think, a really good hire. Houston fires their coach Dana Holmgren, and it kind of feels like maybe Jeff Traylor ends up there. I think now maybe Jeff might look at that as a lateral move because I don't know. I mean, I know the UTSA is not in the Big 12, but I mean he's competing for conference championships. If they'd have beat Tulane last week or Saturday, and that was a good game. Tulane just has so much. Speaking of Tulane, man, I love what they're doing. I'm glad that their coach looks like he's staying. But anyway,
they play SMU next week for the AAC championship.
Wow, SMU, man, look at that season. 9-2, 9-2.
10-2 now.
Yeah, 10-2 after the win over Navy, and they throttled Navy. That offense for them is just really, really good. But let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start with the Big 12. Texas dispatched Texas Tech 57-7. This was the game Texas needed. After a couple of close calls with the Kansas States and the TCUs where you get the big lead and you just couldn't quite, for whatever reason, finish it out. They finished it out against Texas Tech. Keelan Robinson, huge day on special teams, had a 95-yard kickoff return. He had another good kickoff return. Offense looked good. Defense looked good. It's everything you wanted. I still contend that red zone offense is terrible, and that's going to end up costing them. It won't cost them Oklahoma State, but if they were to find their way into a playoff, it wouldn't shock me to see them lose because they only had like 6 field goals instead of 4 touchdowns. But still, I think that was a good win for Texas.
Oh yeah, like the notes say, man, it was great play all 3 phases. Yeah, the red zone needs some work. But you get a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown by Jet Bush. That run was hilarious. Like it looked like almost like Dexter Coakley, but a little bit slower.
Yeah,
just the way he was running, like kind of derpy.
And it was a fluky interception. It went off the foot of the running back who they were throwing it to. It was fluky in that not only Bush saw that, but like the officials did too, because that's one that's usually whistled. Because everybody thought it hit the ground.
I watched most of this toward the end when Texas was blowing them out. It was pretty nice to hear the fans go nuts when Arch Manning entered the game. They were pretty excited to see him.
I did not realize how much of a cannon he has. I mean, he's going to have to actually throttle it down. I mean, I know the energy and the adrenaline was flowing, but that dude was throwing some John Elway, a 5-yard out that you could see flames coming off the ball. He's throwing it so hard. That one that he threw in the back of the end zone that was incomplete, and the wide receiver, they showed it on slow motion, and the wide receiver's head, like he's looking at Arch ready to catch it, and he's looking, and the ball's already back here because the ball. I mean, he's got. I see it now. I see it. I knew he could throw deep. That's fine. Every quarterback can throw deep. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. Even bad quarterbacks, if you just say 3 steps, throw deep, they can do it. That's one of the easiest throws. But man, the velocity he has, I can see, and I see a path now where Quinn Ewers maybe decides to go pro, and Archie is your starting quarterback next year. But anyway, so they won, they clinched their Big 12, and that led to Saturday, basically, Oklahoma State wins, they're in. Oklahoma wins, or Oklahoma had won. So basically, it was either Oklahoma State wins and they're in, or Oklahoma's in. And I'm going to tell you what, I even put this on our sports rehab page. For the first half, Oklahoma State didn't look like they wanted to play football.
I don't know what team I'm going to get when I see Oklahoma play. There's that team that lost to South Alabama earlier in the year.
Yep.
That was a god-awful team. They couldn't protect, they just played mistake-filled instead of mistake-free. They're on this roll where they're just handing the ball off to Gordon and putting him into the Heisman race, at least the Doug Walker race.
Yeah.
And then they had a roadblock a couple of weeks ago, and then I still don't know who this team is. Good job on getting to the Big 12 title game, Oklahoma State. Ollie Gordon better get 45 carries next week. Or
I don't think it'll matter.
What'd you say?
I don't think that'll matter. And I'm not saying this as a Texas fan. I'm just saying this as the one. And he might prove me wrong, but the weakness of the Texas defense has been that back end if they don't get pressure. The run defense with Tavon Sweat has not been the weakness. I mean, this is if you're riding up. And me and Grant were having this discussion in the hotel room. Yeah, for revenge factor, you want Oklahoma. That would have felt good. Blah blah blah. But if you're talking about the perfect team that Texas needs to play in the Big 12 championship, it's Oklahoma State. They don't throw the ball well. Their quarterback at times is terrible. They have a really good running back, but you're running into the teeth of that defense. And then Oklahoma State's defense just at times is okay, but at times is not. I mean, they give up 34 to BYU, and I know some of that was defensive, turnovers, but BYU didn't look like they wanted to be here. I mean, this was an ugly game that the score makes it seem like it was way more exciting than it really was. That first half in that game was just terrible football.
Well, BYU was down to their backup quarterback, and they played mistake-free ball for the most part. They had a couple of fumbles. But yeah, the fact that they were up on Oklahoma State on the road says all you need to know about Oklahoma State. They're still a shaky team. I don't see them winning next week against UT.
Yeah,
I'm someone that's not a fan of any college football team.
Personally. Yeah, you just watch football.
Yeah, so just from objectively speaking, I don't see how UT could lose this game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. All right, let's go ahead and go on to the other national games. If we get to the rest of the Big 12, we will. But, I mean, none of those games really – I mean, they were fun. I'll say that. The Kansas State, Iowa State was fun. It was snowy. It's exactly what you think when those two teams play at this time of the year. But let's go ahead and go to the big games outside the state because that's what we're all here for. We'll go in order. We'll start Michigan versus Ohio State. Michigan win. They couldn't beat them for 8 years. Now they've won for 3 straight. I love how apocalyptic these fan bases get when their team hasn't won a this game in a couple of years. This goes in spurts. This is not one of those rivalries that they go back and forth. Usually one will win for a few years. So now Ryan Day's the worst head coach in the history of football for Ohio State fans. I will say this game shows you the difference in how Harbaugh is aggressive and Ryan Day is very conservative. And there were a couple of points where it's like, dude, you've got to go for it. It's a rivalry game. You got to seize the momentum, and they wouldn't. And to me, that's where the game was won for Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, hey, and from Michigan's point of view, they actually played kind of conservative. They were just, you look at J.J. McCarthy, who was, when Harbaugh was on the sidelines, he was a Heisman Trophy candidate. But after that, he's been more of a glorified game manager, just hand the ball off and just trying to be as efficient as possible. It reflects in his stats: 16 to 20, 148 yards and only a touchdown. But heady guy, very solid. Blake Corum on his 23rd birthday had 88 rushing yards and took a couple touchdowns. That was basically the difference in the game. You hit the nail on the head on Ohio State on offense, though. They have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's projected to be even better than his dad.
Yeah.
And he had 118 yards and a touchdown, but he only had 5 receptions. I mean, in a big game like this, he should have had probably double-digit receptions at the very least.
Yeah, you and I talk about this all the time. We're in a risk aversion era of NFL and college football. They'll tell you, and it'll show on the film, hey, look, Michigan had him bracketed and Michigan rolled their safety. Yeah, you know what? It doesn't matter. If that's your best guy, and that's one of the best guys in America, which Marvin Harrison Jr. is, and I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to he's going to be the Randy Moss style that's going to walk right into the NFL and just flourish. You make sure you get him the ball. You in no way go, okay, let's give what the defense takes us. I take what the defense gives us. I get that, and I'm actually a big proponent of that. But there are certain moments and certain times where you go, like Oklahoma State, like you said, I don't care what Texas is doing. You're giving Ollie Gordon the ball 45 times. and you're just saying, hey, we're going to beat or lose to you with our best guy. Ohio State at times they just don't do that. Now I'm saying that Travion Henderson, it was weird. You thought he was the best guy because he wasn't running well, but they kept feeding him the rock. They threw the ball 30 times. So out of 30 complete, and I don't know how many times they threw to Harrison. I don't have that stat, but 30 completion or 18 completions, 30 attempts, and only 5 of them are Marvin Harrison Jr. You don't win like that. That's the kind of things that makes you that you lose rivalry games.
Yeah, and just throughout the game, he wasn't Ryan Day, head coach of Ohio State, wasn't making the best of calls. Trying to pull up something here, but yeah, Michigan. Another thing that was a difference in this game was the 4th down conversions. They were 3 of 3 on 4th down, very very aggressive.
That's the aggressive part I'm talking about.
Yeah, but yeah, Ryan Day, like he needs to lay off on the beard dye.
Robert Salah got to stop going to the same hair guy.
Yeah, him and Robert Saleh, like Jets head coach Robert Saleh, like they both are dyeing their hair, and it just looks very apparent that's what they're doing. And it just, I don't know, it was an eyesore to me. It has nothing to do with football,
yeah,
but
Ryan Day has a weird look. Like Ryan Day, especially when you put the fake beard color, he everything about him looks fake. And I don't
what
mean
are you saying, Terry? Are you saying he had some extra work done?
Maybe around the eyes, just a little bit. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna kick you off. Here we go, team." I mean, I don't know. Anyway, now the question is, has his seat started heating up at Ohio State? I don't think it really has. I think that's just in the moment rivalry. The dude is 56-7. Yeah. Now, to be fair, his only Big Ten losses have been to Michigan, but there's also that his only Big Ten losses have been to Michigan. Kind of feeling like that Mac Brown in the Oklahoma UT era, which, by the way, tracks because Mac Brown beat Bob Stoops in year 1, and then OU went on that stretch. Now the difference is back then is they were destroying Texas. All of the losses in this one have been pretty solid, good 1 possession games. But anyway, Michigan assures themselves as long as they beat Iowa into the playoffs. Ohio State's now in a wait and see mode,
like they were last year.
Like they were last year, but I don't think they get in this year. Even if weirdness happens, it would take an extreme amount of weirdness to happen. But we'll see. They're going to be 6th when the committee comes out tomorrow, but that's simply because they're the recent 1-loss team. Next weekend, when they don't have a game, Oregon and Texas and even Alabama will probably. Well, if Alabama loses, they won't. Then you got Georgia coming down, and that's going to be really interesting. But you're going to have Ohio State fall out of the thing as long as the right teams win the Big 12.
I have an interesting question to pose to you.
All right.
What if Alabama beats Georgia next week for the SEC championship? Would they put Alabama in the playoffs and not Georgia?
Oh, yeah, by stretch. I think the bigger thing is, okay, and let's just go ahead and get into it. We'll talk about the games as we're talking about this because that's what we're all talking about here is the scenario. So the big elephant in the room is what if it basically comes down to A&M, Texas and Alabama for the last spot, and Alabama beats Georgia. What do you do as a committee? Do you go by what you claim in that head-to-head matters? Because Texas went into Alabama. This wasn't in Texas. This wasn't a neutral game. They went into Alabama and beat them, and not only beat them, but beat them by 10 points by holding the ball all of the 4th quarter and basically it was not a fluke win. It was not a goofy win. It wasn't a crazy win. It was a win. So if that's your 2 teams, if you're the committee, do you stick to that or do you go with the shiny object of they beat Georgia? I don't know. I mean, as a Texas fan, I would think you stick. I mean, I would hope they'd stick to head to head, but also if you're going to claim things, you got to stick by them. And that's been my biggest issue with the committee is like every year it feels like they fit the narrative they want with their rules. Head to head supposed to matter a lot. So we'll see.
I would be very upset if Texas wins the Big 12 and Alabama wins the SEC and the committee puts Alabama over Texas. I don't think it's fair. I think I'll be happy that they'll expand the playoffs to 8 teams. It was not fair, and it would look so bad. And you know what? If Alabama gets in, so will Georgia.
Now, I don't think that's a good. I mean, I say that if certain things happen,
Happened 2 years ago.
well, yeah, but that was different, and you know how angry I was about that, and it wasn't because it. The main reason I was angry about what happened then is Alabama dominated Georgia in that SEC title game. And I contend, if you want to talk collusion and you want to talk conspiracy, I contend that Alabama was happy to let Georgia get a couple touchdowns to make that score look close, because that game was not close. You watched that game. Alabama came out immediately and dominated them and then throttled back. But anyway, this year it's way different. First off, you've got 4 teams that are unbeaten.
Right.
Second off, the standings have stayed pat. This has been the longest the standings have stayed pat in like 30 years. Like, no, and all the losses have happened to teams against each other. I mean, Texas has a bad loss because but it's Oklahoma's now up to 12. And they might even be a little higher depending on how this ranking goes. In fact, I would love to see if maybe they sneak into 10. But I think there is a path where Georgia, Alabama, and Texas gets in, but it's going to take Michigan being upset. It would take, Washington and Oregon in a way will negate each other, or if that's a close game, do both of them deserve to get in? The committee, and I will say this, I will be mad if Texas wins out, and if they get left out, but everybody's unbeaten ahead of them, I have no problem with that. If they get left out and there's another one-loss team ahead of them, I will have an issue with that, because the only one-loss teams it could be would be Alabama, who Texas beat, Ohio State, who just had a loss, Georgia, who just had a loss, or let's say, Oregon. If Oregon gets in with one loss, I can't really make an argument about that. They will get their revenge game. So if they beat Washington, which a lot of people feel like that's going to happen, I don't know. I know Washington struggled against Washington State.
They struggled in other games too. They look pretty shaky.
Oh yeah, they've looked shaky, but so did Texas. Texas, and I think the one thing people aren't talking about though when it comes to Texas is, on all these teams, Texas has the better strength of schedule. Isn't that supposed to matter too? Because like they have the best strength of schedule over Oregon by I think Texas will end up at 8th or 9th at strength of schedule, and Oregon's going to be like 23rd. Because as great as the Pac-12 started, it collapsed as the year went along.
UCLA, USC, Colorado,
Utah. Well, and Utah sucked, because I think if Cam Rising had been healthy, I think Utah's playing in this game. Utah's a really good team. They just did not have a backup that could step in. But yeah, Texas's strength of schedule is the best of anybody on the outside looking in. They're almost as good as everybody in the top 4. Now, the question I will ping pong, or I guess the big thing now is pickleball. I'll pickleball back to you. If Florida State beats Louisville, but it's like 10-9, 7-3, do they still go in as an unbeaten on the record, even though we all know what's going to happen in that first round?
Yes. They're unbeaten in a Power 5 conference.
But a Power 5 conference that gets even less respect than the Pac-12. And a Power 5 conference that's terrible this year.
Especially with the fall of Clemson. Not fall for them, it's 8-4.
Fall, and then maybe the rise, but too late in the season for this year.
North Carolina, they started strong, dropped. Duke started strong, quarterback got hurt, they dropped. It started off like a great conference, and then it kind of just started going back down to what we know it as. But having said that, yeah, if Florida wins, they'll be undefeated. I can't. They just put them in the 4 slot, but they definitely deserve it. If Washington wins, you put them in the 3 slot, because they beat a really good Oregon team twice in that scenario. But even though they have played shaky most of the season, they should still be in, just because they're undefeated and they're a conference champion in a major conference.
So right now, I'm just going to go with the top 25 because that's what we have. The AP top 25, it's Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Florida State 4, Oregon 5, Ohio State 6, Texas 7. Mm-hmm. Again, Texas, if they win, will jump Ohio State simply because Ohio State doesn't have a game. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go right. So let's go off the scenario right now that Washington beats Oregon.
Okay.
Well, then Texas is the 5th looking in. Mm-hmm. I guess the biggest thing they have to happen is Florida State lose to Louisville, which is not out of the question. And yeah, I know Louisville lost to Kentucky, but let's be honest. I know it's a rivalry game, but Louisville had nothing to win or lose in that game. They're not going to a better bowl by winning that game. They're not going to a worse bowl by losing that game. If they beat Florida State, they're in a New Year's Eve bowl, period, or New Year's Day bowl, period, in the discussion. So I do think that there's a situation where Mark Stoops and Kentucky had way more to play for, all that. So in fact, I'll go ahead and say it. I think I would make Louisville the slight favorite in this game, simply because Florida State's quarterback situation.
Yeah, I think Louisville should be favored in this game. I think, honestly, if you're asking me who's going to win, I really think Louisville's going to win, even though I really like Florida's team outside of the quarterback position right now.
Yeah.
Roadmaker's solid. Jordan Travis was just something else.
Yeah, and he was a starter before Jordan Travis stepped up. So, I mean, he can do it. But, yeah, you saw the difference in that Florida game. Just at times, Florida State's offense just goes nowhere because they don't have the mobility at quarterback and to make the plays outside the pocket and everything. But let's go back to the Alabama thing. So let's go ahead and talk about, before we talk about anything else. And I ask you this. Hang on, So I know how they win is epic. It's awesome. It's one of the classic moments of college football. It will become one of the top 10 30 years from now, when you talk great college football plays, that will become one of them. But does it not hurt their resume that they had to get a miracle win against a team that New Mexico donkey stomped the week before? I think that while they won the game, I think Alabama lost a step when it comes to the committee.
Donkey stomp, a very good description.
Oh, yeah, donkey stomp, yeah.
Auburn 6-6. They get the SEC bias and support, just because if Alabama can beat an SEC team, that means a lot to the voters. Even though it was a really close game, they give the benefit of the doubt for the fact that it's a rivalry game, and that weird stuff usually happens in this game. So I think Alabama's going to get a pass, even though Auburn in their first year under Grant's favorite coach, Hugh Freeze, is finishing 6-6. Milroe didn't look great, like stat-wise, he did, but he didn't really look great. On that 4th and 31 that got them the win, he had all day to throw. Now, I will say that touchdown throw he made to the back corner to Isaiah Bond, the back corner, perfect. Couldn't have been thrown any better. Clutch, gutsy. But for most of that game, Javarius Johnson for Auburn had the game of the day. Like, he was just all over the place.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, Auburn's defense, they did the exact worst thing you could do. They didn't rush enough, but they didn't also have enough guys in coverage where it mattered.
Yeah.
If you watch that play from the all 22s behind Alabama, the slot guy goes in and turns right to the middle, and for some reason, 2 Auburn guys go with him. It wasn't really the fault of the guy that was right there. He's bracketing into the goalpost. You're supposed to have somebody bracketing out to the pylon or rush them. Who cares if Jalen Milroe rushes out and then run? He's not running for 31 yards. So send the house. Yeah. Send 7 guys, put the others literally at the back of the end zone, where no matter where they throw, you've got a guy that can get there in time. But, yeah, give credit to the throw and the catch. And, he put it in the only spot. But, yeah, the kick 6 or the kick 6,
yep.
You can make the case today, Saban, he lobbied for the 2 seconds. They put it on. Maybe you shouldn't try a field goal. But you still don't think, hey, we're going to have that guy return the ball 109 yards. This was bad coach. Milrose gets credit again, but this was terrible defensive play calling right there. Terrible. That's that kind of call that, honestly, usually gets coaches fired.
Well, that will make Grant very sad if that happens. But
No, Hugh Freeze. Not about the defense coordinator. No, Hugh Freeze is fine. In fact, I think you can say that, like you said, as bad as last week was, or 2 weeks ago now, New Mexico losing that, I think he gained a lot more capital by almost beating Bama. No, I meant the defense coordinator. I don't know how you come back into that room and get respect, because that was a terrible call. The coverage made no sense. But anyway, so you think it doesn't hurt? I think it does. I do think that hurts them a little bit because when it comes down, and again, if it comes down to them in Texas and they beat Georgia. I do think you have to start going to the little things. And I do think you go, okay, that's great that they beat Georgia, but last week they needed a miracle to beat a 6-6 team, whether it's a rivalry or not. They needed a miracle to beat a 6-6 team. So I do think that that's one of those things that might happen, because we can talk about Texas's problems of closing out a game. And they had key moments, like Adonis Mitchell against Kansas State saved them with a beautiful falling back catch on the shoulder. But that wasn't a miracle play. That was a good catch. Alabama needed a legitimate miracle play. And good for them. And I love those. I love Auburn. I love their fan base. But it is fun that, man, even when they think they get the best of them, it always ends up turning out like this.
Yeah.
So let's see. Now let's go to I guess that's it on all the games this week. Oh, SMU beat Navy. Great. Tulane lost beat UTSA. Two good programs. Liberty beat UTEP 42-28. They've completely changed their team. You know, we all know them for what's his name? Who was that quarterback?
Malik Willis.
Yeah, Malik Willis and Hugh Freeze. They beat UTEP with like 400 yards rushing on the day. That's pretty cool. Let's see. North Texas beat UAB. Texas State had maybe the biggest. They went from giving up 77 points last week and losing by 50 to scoring 52 this week and beating South Alabama. Rice is going bowling. Good job by the Rice Owls. Florida Atlantic. They beat them 24-21. But let's go ahead and go into this week's games. You've got the conference championship games. Let's see. Let's start with Texas, Oklahoma State. I think it's going to play out a lot like. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the Texas Tech, because I think Oklahoma State can play keep away long enough. But I don't think Texas needs any kind of luck, or they have to close it out. I think they win comfortably.
Yeah, I think Texas wins by a couple, or not 3 touchdowns. I think it'll be a couple late touchdowns, maybe a pick 6. But yeah,
I could see them throttling up because they're trying to make a last minute push, with a really big, hey, we won our conference game by 5 touchdowns type thing.
Yeah, it'd be a good way to close out their Big 12 career before they move over to the SEC. I think Texas will win. But yeah, it would help them if they pad the stats, because they might have to compete with Oregon for one of those last spots.
If it's with Oregon, I don't think Texas can get in, because Oregon will get the revenge game and beat a top 5 team. And it's the only, you know how the committee loves that. And I get that. Totally. And to be honest with you, if Oregon beats Washington, I don't know, man. Maybe they deserve it, because I know Washington has struggled, but Washington still beat Oregon, and they still looked good. I did want to bring up the Apple Cup. They did announce that will be continued. I guess Boeing did it's a 5-year contract. I would love to see Oregon and Oregon State do that. That was a great picture going around, where the mascots had their arms around each other at the end of the game. The Civil War needs to continue. You can continue those without them being in conference. Hell, I think people forget that for 80 years, Oklahoma and Texas were not in the same conference. That wasn't until 96 that game became a conference game, and they literally would schedule it right in the middle of their seasons, and that they were fine. You can still do that, especially now with 12 playoff spots coming up, or 8 next year. I can't remember if it starts at 8 next year or goes to 12. Anyway, you can lose those games and still get in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, think about Kentucky and Louisville. Think about South Carolina and Clemson, Florida State and Florida. None of those teams play in the same conference.
South Carolina, North Carolina.
Yeah. So it's definitely doable. So I hope they continue it.
So in that game, Oregon, Washington, who do you have winning?
Oregon.
I like Washington. I still think that, they didn't win by a fluky way last time. I know Washington might not be playing as well, but I just don't know how much you can take that into consideration anymore. I think we get caught up too much in how a team looks. We can go back and talk about that with the Eagles at 10-1. You can talk about how, they almost isn't. They won. They're 10-1 because they keep winning. Washington is unbeaten because they keep winning. And you're going to get your best shots in Washington State and things like that. And Washington State wasn't a bad team by any stretch this year.
They started strong. They kind of faded. It wasn't like they were getting blown out, but some of the games that were blown out. But Cam Ward is a pretty solid quarterback. I think they just need a couple of pieces for next year, and then they'll be a little bit better. But
the crazy thing about Cam Ward? Cam Ward is from Texas. He played at West Columbia, and He ran in a slot T system where he threw like 30 times for a whole year.
Wow,
You
because
know?
he's in Washington State where they're more pass happy.
Oh yeah,
It's
I think
crazy.
yeah, and me and Grant have that conversation all the time now. Like, what if Columbus would have just West Columbia would have just done the same thing? Like, hey, we've got this special dude. Let's change our offense. But anyway, no, I still have Washington winning that game. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a great game. I think it's the best game on the docket for this week. Georgia, Alabama. I kind of feel like Georgia donkey stomps Alabama. Look, that Alabama has played well since the loss to Texas. But again, you go back to this isn't the old SEC. The wins have not been like they're beating legitimate top 5 teams. Mississippi's they're good. LSU they're good, but every one of those teams have a big flaw that Alabama's been able to exploit. Georgia doesn't. And I just don't think I don't even think this is close. I don't think it's ugly, but I don't think there's any doubt.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Georgia wins this game. Probably going away in the second half. I think it'll be one of those boring SEC first halves, and then they'll just kind of start hitting Bowers and start running, imposing their will in the second half. And I think that'll be what's the difference in this game.
All right, and then Louisville, Florida State. I have Louisville winning. Maybe that's just part of me because of Texas, but I really do think. I mean, even if he'd have been healthy, Louisville's a very solid team. Again, Kentucky, yeah, but I still contend that this was a bigger game, and I think they win this game.
Yeah, I think Louisville caps a great season by upsetting Florida State, which in our scenario would eliminate Florida State from the playoffs. Yeah, I think Louisville wins it.
All right. So when we meet now, we will meet next week again on Monday. So we'll be doing more of this because we won't know 100%. But after this weekend's games, who are your 4 playoff teams?
Well, based off my predictions, I have Georgia number 1. I think Michigan will beat Iowa, so I have Michigan number 2.
I think that will be an uglier game than people are expecting. All the jokes about Iowa's offense, and it's terrible. And it was terrible before the quarterback got hurt. It's just a terrible scheme. Yeah. Their defense is legit. Their defense can give, and it's not like Michigan's offense lights up the sky all the time, but they will win. I don't want to make it act like they won't, but don't be surprised if I think I gave you 24-10. So I do think it'll be closer than what people think.
I feel that Washington's going to lose to Oregon, so I feel that Oregon is going to get the 3 spot, and Washington will be eliminated. And then I feel that Louisville is going to beat Florida, so Florida State will be eliminated. And I think because Texas, I feel they're going to win the Big 12 championship, they'll leapfrog Ohio State and get that last spot.
The thing that worries me as a Texas fan is if Oregon beats Washington and it's 35-34, 28-21, I can see a path where they say, let's run them again.
Yeah.
Let's put them in. We'll put them on opposite sides, and then let's see what happens. But I agree with your assessment. I think at the end of the day, Georgia number 1, Michigan number 2, number 3 is probably Oregon if they win, or Washington if they win. Now, I could see a point where Washington, if they win, Michigan's a little ugly. I could see them leapfrog, but it doesn't matter. They're going to play each other, whether they're 2-3 or 3-2. I think what we're going to have is Texas versus Georgia in the first round, Michigan versus.
So you feel Texas will get the 4 spot?
I think as long as Florida State loses and Texas wins, they get the 4 spot. Ohio State will be the 6th team now because they've just barely lost to a top 4 team. But next week when they don't play, they're going to lose points. That's just how that works, and that's the way it should work. You're not. This is not a year where you pick a team, a 1-loss team, and it's the same thing with what you said about Florida. If everybody that should wins their championship, the champions go into the next round.
Yeah, if the top 4 win, they all deserve it.
Yep,
and that's okay.
I do think there's a pause though if Florida State wins and it's an extremely ugly game. I mean, it has to be ugly. Like I said, it has to be like 7-6, and Florida State has 5 turnovers, and it has to be that ugly because then you go, okay, are they the most deserved? And also, do you really want them to play Georgia? And let's be honest, if you just want to go with by eye test, Texas Georgia is a fun game. Like Texas Georgia is a really good game. Georgia Florida State, it looks good.
It'll be like a bye
historically,
week for George at that point. Yeah, I
oh yeah,
agree.
I mean TCU of last year would beat this year's Florida State team without their starting quarterback. All right, do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh, one of our sponsors, Grandeur
Yeah,
Pest Solutions. I used them recently, and they were really good and thorough. Just wanted to plug them. I usually have some cobwebs in the back patio, so it's just more of a maintenance service. But yeah, I kind of told them the situation, went through the details of my house, the history since I've lived here, and they gave me recommendations. And left a couple of patches in my garage just in case. Sometimes there's like a little opening there
yeah,
in
yeah.
most garages where um, pests can go get in. So it's kind of a good little trap. So yeah, I mean, I was very satisfied. They responded quickly to me. It was great service in my opinion.
Yeah, Corey, and that's who you dealt with. They do a great job.
Yeah, no, Corey, yeah.
That's what we talk about in the ad. It's not just about that they do a service. Even as busy as they've gotten, when you reach out to them, they're going to reach out, usually at least reach out to you within 24 hours and figure out what you need, or at least figure out, hey, let's set up a time and we can meet and all. And they do great work. And we do appreciate Corey for helping us get the Plano studio. I told you, don't invite Grant over. This is what happens. It's like the rats just come out of his pants. It's crazy, dude. We have to pay so many hotel fees in the season because when Grant gets there, it's just like, why is there a scorpion in your pants? He's like a 2-year-old. Things are just always in his pants. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week. We'll be back next week. We're going to split the shows for one more week for sure. Then we're going to have like a 4-week period where we have nothing. I know Noe wants to break down the Army Navy game, go through depth charts and all that kind of stuff, but I will not let him do that. Until next time, he's in third Noe. I'm Terry Bennett. This is OutDrank the Coverage, the college edition, brought to you by Grandeur Pest Solutions on L4 Media.